This is a video to help you study for your review, for your test. It is our Unit 1 mini test. The first slide, add, subtract integers, and classifying numbers. This is what your test will be over. So, vocabulary. A whole number. Remember, a whole number has no fractions, no decimals, and no negatives. It is our counting numbers and 0. That's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Our rational numbers is any number that can be turned into a fraction. That's basically all of your numbers. Integers are your positive and negative numbers. Integers can have no fractions and no decimals. Let's look at slide 3. You're going to take and drag the numbers into the correct spot. Remember, whole numbers cannot have fractions or decimals. Integers cannot have fractions or decimals. Whole numbers cannot have negatives. Rational numbers are your fraction numbers. So let's look at that first. Here's 2.5. I'm going to click on 2.5 because that is rational, and I'm going to drag it to the rational. -3. -3 is an integer. It cannot be a whole number because it is negative. 21 is a whole number. I can count to 21. 53 is a whole number. 3 2/10. It is a decimal, so it cannot be an integer, so it has to be rational. 3/4 is rational. It is a fraction. -11. It cannot be a whole number because it is negative, so it has to be an integer. 9/10. 9/10 is a decimal number. I can write it as 9/10. Therefore, it's rational. 8 is a whole number. -6 is an integer. -36 is an integer. And 75 is a whole number. Slide 4. Check all of them that apply. You're going to use the checks that are on the right-hand side. You see the green checks, and you're going to drag them into the correct spot. -52. -52 is an integer, so I'm going to put a check on the integer. I'm taking and dragging it to the integer spot. But now remember, on this slide, if it was rational, it is also an integer. If you think about if we have Texas, Manville, and then Rodeo Palms, if you're at Rodeo Palms, you are also in Manville and you are also in Texas. So if it's a whole number, it is all three. Here, this is an integer, so that means it is also rational. 78 is a whole number. That means it is also an integer, and it is also rational. Six-thirds. This is 6 divided by 3. 6 divided by 3 is really 2. So that is really 2. 2 is a whole number. So that means it is going to be all 3. Decimal 8. 8/10 is a rational number. It cannot be an integer because it is a decimal number. So we are talking about opposites and absolute value. The opposite of negative 25 is positive 25. So I'm going to click on the 25 and then I'm going to drag it here. These are opposites. Now we're going to talk about absolute value. The absolute value of 25, the distance away from 0, is 25. Remember, absolute values cannot be negative. It is just the distance away from 0. The opposite of 9 is negative 9. The opposite of 9 is negative 9. Now we're going to do absolute value. The absolute value of 9 is 9. So I'm clicking on them and I'm dragging them to their spot. So here, the absolute value of negative 33 is positive 33. So let's do the opposites of 33. I'm going to take my positive 33. The opposite of positive 33 is negative 33. So here, the opposite of 3 is negative 3. We're going to do a little bit something different with this one. I want you to take the absolute value of 3 and put it right here. The absolute value of 3 is actually 3. So we're going to put that here. Now, the opposite of 7, negative 7, the opposite of negative 7 is positive 7. The absolute value of 7 is positive 7. So this is opposites and absolute values. Let's go to the next slide. Here, you might have to zoom out a little bit to see all the counters. The yellow chips represent 1 positive, and the red chips represent 1 negative. Use the chips to demonstrate the math that is occurring in each equation. Once you have solved the equation with the chips, type the answers in the text box. If you need more chips, just click the chip you need and then edit, copy, then edit and paste. So if we need more chips, I'm going to show you a trick. Click on the yellow, hit Control and D at the same time. So if you need more chips, you're going to hit Control and D. That duplicates the chip. Okay, so let's look at this first one. Positive 6 So I'm going to take positive 6 and I'm going to put it right here. Four, and I need 2 more. That's my positive 6. Now it says I'm going to add a negative 7. So I'm going to take my 7 red and put right underneath. That's 6, and then I need 7. Here's my 7. Each of these red and yellow is a 0 pair. You can do of one, two things. You can take and match your 0 pairs up and take them away. Or you can keep them here and go up to the line and cross them out. You can make your line bolder. Go to your line and cross your 0 pairs out. I am taking a red and a yellow and I'm crossing them off. Those are my 0 pairs. They cancel each other out. So once I've canceled those all out, I have a negative 1 left. So my answer is negative 1. So I'm going to type negative 1 into that box. Now let's look at the next one. Negative 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4. There's my negative 4, and I'm adding a negative 4, a negative 8. I'm adding a negative 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So now I'm going to count these up. 4 plus 8 is negative 12. So here I have negative 3. 1, 2, 3. And it tells me I'm going to subtract a negative 2. So if I can just take and subtract a negative 2, 1, 2, I'm going to have left a negative 1. You can also do this by adding the opposite. I need to get rid of 2 negatives, so if I add 2 positives to it, that makes these 0 pairs. Those are my 0 pairs that I can cross off. And that leaves me with still a negative 1. So negative 5. That's 4, 5, and a negative, and I'm going to subtract a negative 9. I can't subtract a negative 9, so I am going to add a positive 9. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Then I'm going to find my 0 pairs. Zero pair there. Here's a 0 pair. Here's also a 0 pair. A 0 pair right here. And another 0 pair. So that is going to leave me with a positive 1, 2, 3, 4. That leaves me with a positive 4. Okay, so for this assignment, you can use these arrows. You will start at 0, and you would make these arrows smaller or longer as you need it. So we're going to take this first one. We are going to go to positive 5. I'm going to increase it a little bit just so I can see. Take my arrow, and I am going to go to positive 5. So I am stopping at positive 5. And then I'm going to take the arrow going the other way, and I'm going to subtract 8. So I'm going to start back at the 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I'll go all the way to the negative 3. And then I'm going to put a star on the negative 3. So my answer is negative 3. Here I am going to go to negative 7. And then I'm going to add a negative 1. So I'll have to shrink my to negative 1. And then I end up with a negative 8. So I'm going to put a star on my negative 8. So if you don't want to use the arrows, if you're getting it better with the chips or with the rule, remember the rule is add the opposite. So I'm going to put a text box in here just to so you can remember the rule. Keep the first sign, change subtraction to addition, and change the negative 6 to the opposite, which is positive 6. This is going to give me a positive 2. Your answer here, let's just check, should be a positive. No, I'm sorry. Should be a negative 5. So now, problem solving. To which set or sets of numbers does negative 15 belong to? Negative 15 will go into the integer spot, so it will go into, it's a rational and it is a integer. So I already have the answers here for this one, so let's discuss this. Joshua is creating a list of numbers. He wants to add numbers to this list that have absolute value of less than 10. An absolute value of less than 10. Which of these numbers will he add to the list? The absolute value of 8 is 8. So 8 is less than 10, so I will add it to the list. The absolute value of negative 13 is 13. 13 is not less than 10, so we do not add it to the list. Negative 5. The absolute value of negative 5 is 5. So 5 is less than 10, so we add it to the list. The absolute value of 3 6/10 is 3 6/10 is less than 10, so I add it to the list. The absolute value of negative 48 is 48. 48 is not less than 10, so it's not added to the list. So the second part, Joshua is creating a list of opposite numbers. Use these numbers to create a list of opposite numbers. So the opposite of negative 9 is positive 9. The opposite of 4 7/10 is negative 4 7/10. The opposite of negative 15 is positive 15. The opposite of 3/5 is negative 3/5. The opposite of negative 6 is negative 6. So let's look at this one. Percy's football team collected yardage as they drove for a touchdown. The table below shows the yardage for each play. Find the sum. So we are adding. This is adding. 20 plus negative 10 plus negative 15 plus 10. If I just look at the chart, I know negative 10 and a positive 10 cancel each other out. So now that means that since they will cancel each other out, that means I have 20 plus negative 15. So if you do it this way, 20 plus negative 15, you're going to end up with positive 5. You will end up with the same thing here. So I want everyone to look at this and tell me which one is correct. Nope, sorry, I'm trying to make it a little bit bigger. There you go. So which of the graphic organizers correctly groups the following numbers? 7 8/10, negative 6, 5, negative 9 3/10. Remember, integers cannot have decimals. So I know it's not A because negative 9.3. I know it's not C because negative 9.3. And again, the same thing on D. So my answer must be B. So to solve this answer, you're going to go to the shapes. Pick any shape you want. I'm just going to pick a regular old circle, and I'm going to circle B. If you know how, you can go to the format options and unfill it. Make it transparent. Right here, fill color and transparent. Now, this one. The students create a statement about the absolute values and opposites. Which statement is true? Darian said the opposite value of 25 is larger than the absolute value of 25 is larger than the absolute value of negative 25. Well, the absolute value of 25 is 25, so those will be equal. The opposite of 42 is larger than the opposite of negative 42. Well, the opposite of 42 is negative 42, and the opposite of negative 42 is 42. So that is equal. The sum of any numbers and its opposite is 0. The sum of any number, so I know I'm going to add, so let's try this. The sum of any number. So I'm going to take 5 plus its opposite, which is negative 5, equals 0. So far, I believe C is true. Go ahead and move that there. So now, the sum of the absolute value of negative 14 and 14 is 0. The absolute value of negative 14 is 14, so that would be 14 plus 14, which is not 0. So my answer is going to be C. Again, you can just take it and circle it. Sean was playing a game with cards. Red cards were negative and black cards were positive. His score was the sum of the numbers on these 5 cards. What was Sean's score? So this is going to be 10 plus negative 5 plus positive 6 plus negative 8 plus positive 3. Sometimes it helps just to put your positives together. If I do 10 plus 6 is 16 plus 3 is 19. So that's going to be 19 plus negative 5 and 8 is negative 13. So when I add those together, I am going to get a positive 6. Okay, so on this slide, they are asking you which expression. The first line, I go from 0 to 5, so I know I'm adding 5. So it can't be this one. Then I'm adding 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we are not going to do slide 14, and do not worry about the last slide. So this is to help you study for your review. Make sure you study. If there's any, you can always stop and answer the questions. So before you get to this slide, you should have stopped. So make sure you have all your answers and you study for your test.